Justice is not a victory, it's a confession. Only by bringing the truth to light can the hidden be set free. Justice out here in the West is often decided by the barrel of a gun or by the silent solitude of a grave. But this morning in the town of Hollow Creek, justice came on a simpler note: the bell. 3 tolls. Long and resonant. It was not a prayer, but a confession. A confession sent from deep underground, from a place where it was believed only the dead could exist. A gray dawn broke over the town. The tolling of the bell shattered the silence. On porches and in the streets, the faces of Hollow Creek's people appeared, their eyes fixed on the bell tower. There was no longer the fear of the previous night, but a mixture of astonishment, disbelief, and a flicker of desperate hope. A silent procession began to move, step by step, as if drawn by an invisible force. Ethan, Jonah, and Ruth returned. They walked through the crowd, each carrying their own burden. Ruth headed directly for the sheriff's office, her hands trembling as she held the Morse code transcription. It was the proof, the confession from the man who had tried to bury the truth. Ethan felt the shift in the townspeople's eyes. They were no longer afraid, they were waiting for an answer. An old man, his face worn with grief, approached with teary eyes. Lena stepped forward, confirming she had heard the bell from deep within the mine. The evidence was all there, but would it be enough to challenge the might of Blackrock mining? The challenge had been laid down. It was to bring the men behind the curtain into the light. All roads led to one place: judgment. The silence of Hollow Creek was shattered by the thunder of a procession of carriages, gleaming in black and gold paint. It was Blackrock. Leading the group was CEO Elias Thorne, an older man with a cold, refined demeanor. He was flanked by 2 lawyers, their faces chiseled, each carrying a briefcase full of documents. He stepped out, a smile on his face that Ethan recognized as a sharp blade, ready to sever any truth. Thorne walked straight towards Ethan, and he spoke without ceremony, looking directly into his eyes with a cold voice.
I've heard the wild accusations. I'm afraid the truth has been distorted.
He denied everything. He called the Morse code from the mine a superstitious fable by simple folk. He dismissed Silas Crow as a madman and the tragic disappearances as a heartbreaking incident, not a crime. He presented forged ledgers, contracts, and legal documents to prove his innocence. Thorne's goal was to discredit Ethan, the journal, and all the evidence they had risked their lives to bring back. He extended his hand, feigning kindness, but his eyes were sharp as a blade.
Hand over the journal, Sheriff. We'll conduct an internal investigation. This is a matter for professionals.
The offer was not help, but an order. An order to bury the truth one last time. Ethan stood motionless. He didn't flinch. He knew this fight wasn't about paper or money. It was about a promise to the departed, and he would not let them be forgotten. Thorne's offer was refused. Ethan did not hand over the journal. He stepped onto the wooden podium in the town square, holding the old leather book, a symbol of an unyielding truth. The crowd was silent, holding its breath. Elias Thorne's eyes were filled with contempt. He thought Ethan was just a naive boy. But he was wrong. As Ethan opened the journal, Lena stepped forward. She didn't speak a word. She simply closed her eyes. Instantly, a cold breeze swept through the crowd. A few people shivered, but not from the cold. They began to hear sounds thought long gone, the rhythm of hammers on stone, the whispers of miners, and then a faint, trembling voice, like a forced confession.
I did it for my family. They would have hurt my family.
The words echoed not in the ears of the crowd, but in their hearts. The fear that was bought, the pain that was buried, it all came rushing back to the surface. A frail, old man, trembling, came forward. It was Jebediah, a former Blackrock accountant. He had escaped and lived in the shadows, fearing that Blackrock would find him. But the bell and the sounds Lena had conjured gave him the courage he needed.
I kept it, just in case.
He presented a hidden copy of a ledger detailing every single payment. Each number was a betrayal, each name was a curse. At that moment, the ghost of Caleb Crow appeared. This time, it wasn't just Ethan and Lena who saw him. Some of the older townsfolk, those who had known Caleb, also felt his presence. Caleb's ghost stood behind Jebediah, nodding in confirmation, and pointed to an old photograph. The photo showed a group of men. One of them was Elias Thorne, standing next to the men who had vanished. Thorne's face had changed over the years, but the same cold eyes remained. The confrontation was no longer just between two men. The confrontation unfolded in the silent town square. Ethan and Ruth held the journals, comparing every line of text. Sheriff Caleb's handwriting in his personal journal perfectly matched the one in Jebediah's ledger. It all lined up. It was all true. But there was something strange. Caleb's signature on the last pages, where he had recorded the orders from Blackrock, had a subtle tremor, a small but crucial difference. There was an invisible pressure weighing on every stroke. A second signature had been added. Ethan held the old photograph. Elias Thorne's face in the photo was younger, but his eyes were unchanged. His eyes were filled with arrogance. He looked at the photo, then at Jebediah. A story from the past, never told, was now decoded. Thorne was not just the current leader, he had been there from the beginning. He didn't just give orders from a distance. He was the one who had imprisoned Caleb, forcing him to sign those orders. At that moment, one of Thorne's lawyers stepped forward, a smirk on his face. He sneered and said,
"I don't see Mr. Thorne's name anywhere. There is no proof."
He was right. Thorne had erased his name from all the documents. But he had forgotten one thing. The scars he left behind couldn't be erased. The proof was not a name, but a story. A story told through fear, through the sacrifice of Caleb and the miners. The secret was now exposed. Elias Thorne was not just an executive, he was a murderer. And now, he couldn't run anymore. Elias Thorne's mask finally fell. As all the evidence was exposed, he knew the game was over. His face twisted with rage. He reached inside his coat and pulled out a revolver. He was ready to kill anyone to protect his secret, to bury the truth forever. The gun was aimed directly at Ethan and Jebediah. He screamed,
"You'll never live to tell this story."
But Jonah, a man of justice and experience, reacted faster. He lunged forward, holding a stick. Thorne fired, but the bullet only grazed Jonah's shoulder. A struggle ensued, and the sound of gunshots echoed through the square. The crowd was no longer afraid. They had enough evidence, enough pain, enough anger to not back down. They began to shout. They didn't flee, they moved in, surrounding Thorne, their cries for justice echoing throughout the town. The church bell, a symbol of truth, tolled again, but this time it was 3 continuous, decisive tolls. The shouts of the people, the ringing of the bell, it all came together, creating a symphony of judgment. Elias Thorne was trapped, with no way to escape. Finally, he was subdued. The head of Blackrock Mining, the man who had controlled the entire town, was arrested. Justice had prevailed. It was over. Everything was settled. Ethan handed the journal to Jebediah, a meaningful gesture, a symbolic act of returning the truth to the man who had lived through the tragedy. Jebediah's eyes were red, and he held the journal close to his chest, as if embracing a long-lost friend. Looking at Lena, Ethan spoke softly.
"This isn't a victory. This is just a confession. True justice isn't about catching the bad guy. It's about freeing the souls of the lost.
Lena looked towards the mine. She saw the ghost of Sheriff Caleb smiling. He gave a faint nod and then dissolved into thin air. The whispers of the miners finally fell silent. The Hollow Creek mine, after so many years of being haunted, was finally at peace. Ethan and his friend's journey had come to an end. Sheriff Caleb's book had fulfilled its mission.